raising children is so much about raising yourself. It's for me about it's personal development. The more you see happening inside of you, the more you can own, for example, your projections, your triggers, your stories and narratives. The more you understand that people just act in a certain way because they want to meet their needs. We all have universal needs that we're trying to meet through strategies. And maybe the strategy is not the most skillful, like throwing Lego bricks. But the needs at its essence, they are universal and important. And I invite you to respect those needs, your own needs and your child's needs, and of the people around you, of course. The child's nervous system gets stronger and stronger and stronger. That means it gets more and more resilient. That means later on in life, when it gets some kind of curveball, something happens unexpected, it can bring itself back into balance more easily. Welcome to today's Stream of Consciousness episode. Today I will share my perspective on the topic of raising children, raising ourselves. Conscious parenting in today's world. This is going to be a really exciting episode, I believe, because as a little cliffhanger, I don't have any kids yet. So let's get started. Why did I choose this title? Raising children, raising ourselves. Well, I believe that raising our children has a lot to do of self-awareness, with personal development, with how we see ourselves, how we see the world, our perceptions, our beliefs. So there's so much that is already on the side of the parent that can be completely disconnected from having kids or not having kids. So that's what I want to share. Some aspects that I believe are very important in self-development for yourself in order to support your children in the most conscious way. And yes, I have this dilemma that I experience that I don't have any kids yet, maybe someday, who knows, but that I don't have any kids yet. And at the same time, want to share my inspiration. I've had this dilemma already when writing my two children's books that you see over here. So I wrote one children's book at the end of 2023, Lara and the Wish Beings, on the topic of nonviolent communication. And my second children's book, Lara and Her Protector, which is currently just in German, but I will translate it to English as well, which I released just at the end of 2024. And while writing these books, I was constantly with this question: am I allowed to write children's books without having children? Am I allowed to do that? Am I qualified enough? Do I have the correct perspective? Can I make it relatable? And so on and so forth. So I had all of these doubts and all of these questions. Fast forward, I just pulled through and thought, I'm just going to write this book. And if in the end no one likes it and no kid can relate to that, then it probably, just didn't work. But I was lucky, and it turns out that many, many people love both of these books. So that's why I also decided today to make this episode on raising children, even without having kids. But that's like just as a little backstory for you, that you know from which place I'm coming and the perspective that I have. And as always, just take with you what you find inspiring and chuck everything else that you don't like, that doesn't inspire you, directly overboard, so to say. All right. Raising children, raising ourselves. Conscious parenting. What does conscious parenting mean? Probably there are millions of different definitions for conscious parenting out there. How I see it is basically being conscious of yourself, of your state, of your words, of your emotional state, of your values, and of what is important for you in your relationship to your children. It also means to me that you can be very clear on what you want for your children, how you want to interact with them, and that you're also aware of certain relationships and correlations, that how you are and how you accompany your kid has a huge impact on it. So for me, it's also to a certain extent about knowledge, knowing which impact it would have. For example, if you judge your kid, if you if you would even get violent physically, just knowing which kind of impact that has, and also especially verbally, and also which kind of space you open, just being conscious of that. These are all different aspects that I find important when it comes to conscious parenting. And at the same time, I really want to acknowledge the situation that many parents find themselves in. Being a parent, I'm not a parent, but having heard from many other people, I imagine that it's not easy. That if you haven't slept sufficiently, and if your child has maybe also not slept well, maybe is sick, maybe is angry and upset, maybe you have a lot of stress at work, then being able to be like this super grounded, present, and loving person is a challenge. And that's definitely is a case. And I don't want to downplay this. So I see this and I value it and I appreciate it. And I know that it's there for many parents. Having that said, I wish that children can grow up with their parents being aware of the most foundational concepts. And with that, I mean, for example, the impact of the nervous system. And I wrote my second children's book about that, Lara and Her Protector. And I want to share that with you in its essence, in the most short and easy to understand way. So, our nervous system, all of us, we have a nervous system. And it follows survival functions. And one of these survival functions is that it scans our environment for threats. And this can be a physical threat, such as back in the days when a saber-toothed tiger would come and would then attack us. We could then scan. And then this nervous system just decides to put us in one of three states, like fight, flight, or freeze. It's like fighting the perceived threat, running away from it to flee, or freezing. And in this freeze mode, we freeze, and with the hope that the predator just would see us, the prey, as not interesting, as dead, and would not want to eat us, and then just goes away again. And then what happens in nature is that animals, for example, there's a gazelle, I think that's the name in English, an antelope, running around in the savannah. And then a lion comes and wants to attack it. It freezes. And then the lion might think, not so interesting anymore, walks off. And then this antelope would run away, go back to flight mode, and then in the end, shake itself off. And afterwards, you would see it would continue walking regularly, as if nothing had happened. Why am I sharing this with you? Because we humans have the same foundational system running inside of us. And how does that relate to parenting and children? If your children's nervous system detects some kind of threat, which can be tiny because this baby is tiny, and that could be losing the connection to his mother or to her mother or his father. That would mean the end of this baby, because the babies or the caretaker, the babies rely to 100% on the love and the care of others, taking care of them. So if this connection gets interrupted, it would mean the death for this child. And it doesn't want that. So this baby does everything in its power to receive love, because then it receives connection, and that means that it will survive. So if you as a parent act in a certain way that this baby doesn't feel safe, it will go into an internal freeze state. And if it then doesn't find itself back, like the antelope shaking, for example, or being held by another caretaker, if this baby doesn't receive that, it will remain stuck in the freeze state, and that leads to trauma. So, long story short, if babies, children, don't receive co-regulation, that means being held by others, for example, by an adult that has a larger nervous system and getting calmed down, this might lead to trauma, which can lead to all certain kinds of diseases. So it's really, really important to know that you, as a parent, have the responsibility to take care of your children's nervous system. And now the beautiful news is, if you do so, that means you holding your child, being there for it in a way that your nervous system is so regulated and calm and balanced that it can also regulate, calm and balance the nervous system of the child. Then the child's nervous system gets stronger and stronger and stronger. That means it gets more and more resilient. That means later on in life, when it gets some kind of curveball, something happens unexpected, it can bring itself back into balance more easily. And for example, people who did not receive sufficient amount of co-regulation when growing up, they will be more prone to anxiety, panic attacks, have a weaker system, immune system, and so on and so forth. It has massive, massive implications. So knowing about this basic correlation of co-regulation, nervous system, children growing up being more and more resilient is so important. And being aware that it's always about a perceived threat. So your child might perceive something as a threat that you don't perceive as a threat. And very often it's about social connection. It's about, will I be loved? And if you can provide this connection, then it's also way more likely that your child won't run around with stories later on like, I'm not enough, I'm not good enough, I need to be better, and this and that. So learn about the nervous system. It's something so important, so essential. And if you want to learn more about this, I invite you to check out my book, Lara and Her Protector, which is beautifully illustrated as well. Okay, that's for me like one core principle of conscious parenting. And I want to invite self-compassion on this path because no one is perfect. Also, there's no perfect parent. It's about just being conscious and aware of what you do and these correlations and relationships. And another aspect that I would like to include here and there, I know there are many, many, many more, but I want to just include these two aspects in this episode, is what I find so valuable, understanding the essence of nonviolent communication. And that means to me that we understand one fundamental correlation. It's the correlation between feelings and needs. Feelings have a function. They are not good or bad. They can either be pleasant or unpleasant, and they have a function. They point towards our needs and tell us if they're being met or not. Feelings point towards our needs and tell us if they're being met or not. And that means, interestingly enough, when your kid is upset, angry, and throws Lego bricks at you, it doesn't mean that it wants something bad for you. It means that it wants to meet one of his needs or her needs. And the best strategy that it can come up with in that moment is throwing Lego bricks. Maybe it wants attention, love, care, appreciation, autonomy, one of the following or another one. So how that correlates with conscious parenting, it removes from parenting the blame game, because you can't say anymore, it's your fault, my child, that I'm feeling this and that way. It's my fault that you're feeling this and that way. It changes the entire game, because we can begin to see that each one of us, children, parents, we're all humans, we all have universal needs that we're trying to meet through strategies. And maybe the strategy is not the most skillful, like throwing Lego bricks. But the needs, at its essence, they are universal and important. And I invite you to respect those needs, your own needs and your child's needs, and of the people around you, of course. So I hope that makes sense to you, to understand this relationship between feelings and needs, and to understand that your kid, whatever it is doing, it's just doing this in order to meet his or her needs. And so are you, with the strategies that you choose, how you want to accompany your kid, also strategies that you choose to meet some of your needs. So I hope this brings some clarity into how you can see parenting, how you can see conscious parenting, and how raising children is so much about raising yourself. It's, for me, it's personal development. The more you see happening inside of you, the more you can own, for example, your projections, your triggers, your stories and narratives. The more you understand that people just act in a certain way because they want to meet their needs, and that's the most skillful way that they have in that moment. The more you understand that our nervous system can put us into fight, flight, or freeze if we perceive a social threat. The more we know this, the better we can deal with this, the more beautiful this living and being part of one family can be. And I really want to invite you to play around with that and to take what is true for you, what you find inspiring, and the rest, chuck it out of the window of these inspirations that you got. Just take what is important to you, what matters to you. And I just wish you from the bottom of my heart an amazing, beautiful family life. And I would not have written these 2 books if it wasn't very important for me to contribute to a world where we can meet ourselves and one another with more compassion, love, openness, and curiosity. I'm deeply grateful for your curiosity. Thank you for sticking around, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next episode of Essence. If you're enjoying this podcast, I invite you to click follow. Your single click can contribute to inspiring more and more people. I also invite you to go to my website and download my free 9 Ways to Live Your Essence guide. All the information you find in the description. So now let's continue with today's episode.